Every time you react, chase, explain, or over-engage, you are spending something valuable. Attention is not free, it is leverage. And the one who gives it away carelessly becomes easy to control. Most people believe money is power. In reality, attention comes first. Money follows attention, influence follows attention, status follows attention. Whoever controls attention controls perception, and perception dictates hierarchy. Attention is a finite resource. You wake up with a limited supply each day. Where you invest it determines what grows in your life. What you ignore weakens. What you focus on strengthens. This applies to people more than anything else. When you give someone consistent attention, emotional reactions, quick replies, long explanations, visible frustration, you are increasing their perceived value. You are signaling importance. And importance is leverage. This is why conflict is addictive. Even negative attention validates presence. Arguments, debates, emotional exchanges, they all communicate the same message: you matter enough for me to engage. Strategic individuals understand this principle deeply. They do not chase attention. They attract it by withholding theirs. Observe high-status figures in any environment. They are not constantly engaging. They are not reacting to every comment. They are not explaining themselves to everyone who questions them. Their attention is selective. Selective attention creates scarcity. Scarcity creates value. When your attention becomes predictable and freely available, your value decreases. If people know they can access your time, emotions, and responses instantly, there is no incentive to respect your presence. Availability reduces perceived worth. This is especially visible in social dynamics. The person who responds immediately to every message appears eager. The one who replies when it suits them appears composed. The difference is not personality, it is perceived leverage. Attention also reinforces behavior. If someone disrespects you and you react strongly, you reward the behavior with emotional energy. If someone provokes you and you engage, you confirm their influence. Even anger is a form of acknowledgement. No reaction is often more powerful than retaliation. This is difficult because humans crave expression. We want to defend ourselves. We want to correct narratives. We want to prove others wrong. But every attempt to correct someone who is not invested in truth is a waste of currency. They gain your energy. You lose position. Attention is also the foundation of authority. When you speak and others listen, you hold influence. But when you speak constantly, your words dilute. Silence makes speech heavier. Consider how leaders operate in controlled environments. They do not interrupt every minor issue. They do not micromanage every conversation. They intervene selectively. And when they do, it carries weight. Weight comes from restraint. Machiavellian strategy treats attention like capital. You do not spend it emotionally. You allocate it strategically. You invest it where it multiplies returns, alliances, opportunities, calculated moves. You do not donate it to provocation. The uncomfortable truth is this: many people give attention in exchange for validation. They engage because they want to be seen. They argue because they want to be acknowledged. They explain because they want approval. This makes them easy to manipulate. If someone can trigger your attention on demand, they control your behavior. And control of behavior is control of outcome. When you begin guarding your attention, something shifts. You respond less. You observe more. You become deliberate. People start adjusting their approach because they no longer receive automatic access. Your silence becomes a filter. Not everyone deserves your focus. Not every comment deserves your energy. Not every challenge deserves your response. This chapter establishes the foundation: attention is currency, and every careless reaction is a payment. Leverage depends on imbalance. The person who needs the interaction less controls it. The person who is more invested is exposed. Over-engagement is the fastest way to reveal investment. When you argue too long, explain too much, reply too quickly, or defend too intensely, you communicate one thing clearly: This matters to me more than it should. That imbalance shifts power immediately. Most people lose leverage not because they lack intelligence, but because they cannot tolerate disengagement. They feel compelled to respond to everything. They mistake participation for strength. But constant participation lowers status. In negotiations, the side that talks more usually concedes more. In arguments, the person trying hardest to prove a point often appears defensive. In social hierarchies, the most available individual is rarely the most respected. Leverage thrives in restraint. When you over-engage, you collapse distance. Distance creates mystery. Mystery creates caution. Caution creates respect. Remove distance, and familiarity replaces reverence. This is why high-value individuals are selective with their engagement. They do not attend every conflict. They do not correct every false assumption. They do not rush to defend every slight. They choose where to step in. Over-engagement also reveals emotional dependency. If someone can provoke you repeatedly and you continue responding, they learn they have access to your nervous system. That access becomes a tool. The manipulative individual does not need to defeat you intellectually. They only need to keep you reacting. Reaction equals attention. Attention equals reinforcement. The more you engage, the more the dynamic strengthens itself. This principle applies digitally as well. Constant posting for validation, rapid replies to criticism, visible frustration in public exchanges. All of it signals investment, and visible investment reduces perceived dominance. Dominance is quiet. The strongest position is one where you could respond, but choose not to. That choice implies control. There is a psychological effect that occurs when someone expects engagement and does not receive it. The brain seeks closure. It replays scenarios. It questions assumptions. It amplifies the importance of the silent party. Silence forces introspection in others. Over-engagement prevents it. The paradox is that many people over-engage because they fear losing influence. They think disappearing from the conversation will reduce relevance. In reality, controlled absence often increases it. When your presence is constant, it becomes background noise. When your presence is selective, it becomes an event. This is how authority is cultivated. Machiavellian strategy demands emotional budgeting. You do not argue for the sake of ego. You do not defend for the sake of pride. You do not engage for the sake of visibility. You engage only when outcome justifies expenditure. Everything else is waste. The discipline required here is uncomfortable. It means tolerating being misunderstood. It means allowing minor disrespect to pass if correction would cost more than it gains. It means letting others talk themselves into positions without interruption. But the long-term advantage is undeniable. Over time, people begin to notice that you do not chase conversations. You do not escalate tension. You do not fill silence. You do not compete for attention. And that detachment reads as strength. This chapter's rule is blunt. The more you engage, the less you command. The less you engage, the more others adjust. Leverage is preserved not by force, but by restraint. Chasing attention is a public admission of dependency. It signals that visibility equals worth in your internal hierarchy. When recognition becomes a need rather than a byproduct, control shifts outward. You begin adjusting behavior to secure reactions instead of outcomes. That is the beginning of weakness. Attention chasing takes subtle forms. It is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it appears as over-posting, over-explaining, over-sharing. Sometimes it shows up as constant humor, constant availability, constant performance. The pattern is consistent behavior designed to extract acknowledgement. The problem is not visibility. Visibility can be strategic. The problem is needing a response. When your satisfaction depends on how others react, your stability is externally controlled. Approval inflates you. Silence deflates you. Criticism destabilizes you. This volatility is detectable, and once detected, it can be manipulated. Individuals who crave attention are easy to steer. Offer praise and they move closer. Withdraw it and they chase. Introduce mild criticism and they attempt correction. Their behavior becomes predictable. Predictability eliminates leverage. High authority individuals reverse this dynamic. They do not pursue attention. They position themselves so attention arrives organically. They build competence, scarcity, or mystery. They allow others to initiate. Initiation is revealing. When others seek you out, they expose interest. Interest creates asymmetry. Asymmetry creates power. This is why silence often outperforms performance. The one who speaks constantly trains others to wait for entertainment. The one who speaks selectively trains others to listen carefully. There is also a deeper cost to chasing attention dilution. When you attempt to be everywhere, respond to everyone, and maintain constant presence, your signal weakens, scarcity disappears, familiarity erodes intrigue. Intrigue is valuable because it invites projection. People assign depth where information is limited. They assume significance where access is restricted. Overexposure removes projection. It replaces curiosity with predictability. Chasing attention also shifts your internal focus. Instead of asking, "Is this effective?" you begin asking, "Will this be noticed?" That shift prioritizes reaction over result. Machiavellian strategy rejects this entirely. The objective is influence, not applause. Applause is temporary. Influence compounds. Consider leaders who rarely speak publicly. When they do, it carries weight. Now compare that to individuals who comment on everything. Their words blend into noise. Volume decreases authority. There is also a psychological trap involved in attention chasing, intermittent reinforcement. Occasional validation feels powerful. It encourages more pursuit. The brain associates effort with reward, even if the reward is inconsistent. This creates dependency cycles. Breaking that cycle requires detachment. You must separate your sense of value from external acknowledgement. Once you no longer need the reaction, you regain strategic clarity. This does not mean withdrawing completely. It means choosing visibility deliberately. You appear when there is advantage. You disappear when engagement serves no purpose. Over time, something shifts. People begin to seek you. They begin to interpret your silence as depth rather than absence. They assign importance to your presence because it is not guaranteed. That is leverage. This chapter's principle is uncompromising. If you chase attention, you fund someone else's power. If attention chases you, you control the exchange. Attention is a currency. Only the disciplined decide how it is spent. Hierarchy in social dynamics is not declared, it is inferred. And one of the fastest ways hierarchy is inferred is through attention flow: who seeks it, who grants it, and who can remove it without hesitation. When you withhold attention deliberately, you interrupt the expected pattern. That interruption forces recalibration. Most interactions run on unconscious agreements. If someone speaks, you respond. If someone provokes, you react. If someone reaches out, you engage. These micro-patterns create predictability. Predictability stabilizes equality. Withholding attention disrupts that stability. When you choose not to respond immediately, or at all, you introduce uncertainty. The other party must now interpret silence. Are you disinterested? Unaffected? Evaluating. Ambiguity increases perceived authority. This is because humans are highly sensitive to social ranking cues. We constantly assess who values whom more. The one who appears less dependent on the interaction is subconsciously ranked higher. Withholding attention communicates non-dependence. It signals that your time and focus are allocated intentionally. It implies standards. It suggests that engagement must be earned, not assumed. That shift alone resets dynamics. Consider conflict. When insulted, the reflex is retaliation. But retaliation acknowledges equality in the exchange. It says, you and I are competing in the same arena. A strategic non-response says something different. This does not require my energy. That framing places you above the conflict, not inside it. This does not mean passivity. It means evaluation before engagement. You assess whether responding strengthens your position or simply satisfies impulse. If it satisfies impulse, it is a poor investment. Withholding attention is especially powerful against manipulative behavior. Manipulators depend on emotional feedback. They test boundaries, provoke insecurity, and observe reactions. If reactions disappear, the incentive disappears. Behavior that is not reinforced weakens. This is not theory, it is conditioning. Attention is reinforcement. Remove reinforcement, and the behavior loses reward value. Over time, individuals either escalate, revealing insecurity, or retreat. In both cases, their strategy becomes visible. Meanwhile, your position strengthens because you did not expose yours. Another effect of withholding attention is narrative control. When you do not respond to every claim or accusation, you avoid legitimizing it. Engagement often amplifies minor issues. Silence can suffocate them. The fear many people experience when withholding attention is being perceived as weak or avoidant. In reality, the opposite is often true. Weakness chases resolution. Strength tolerates ambiguity. When you are comfortable not being immediately understood, not being immediately validated, not being immediately acknowledged, you demonstrate internal stability. Internal stability reads as authority. Machiavellian strategy is not about cruelty. It is about allocation. You choose where attention produces return. You deny it where it produces waste. Over time, this selective engagement creates a pattern. People recognize that access to your focus is conditional. They adjust tone. They reduce frivolous challenges. They approach with more intention. The hierarchy has shifted without confrontation. This chapter's rule is precise. Attention given freely lowers your position. Attention withheld strategically raises it. Hierarchy is not enforced loudly. It is inferred through restraint. Currency only has value because it is regulated. If money were printed without limit, it would collapse. If access were unrestricted, status would dissolve. If attention flows without boundaries, influence disappears. The mistake most people make is allowing others to dictate the rhythm of engagement. They respond when called. They show up when summoned. They argue when provoked. Their attention is reactive. Reactive attention is cheap attention. Power emerges when you control the flow. Controlling the flow means deciding when conversations begin, when they end, how long they last, what topics are allowed, what behavior receives response. This is not dominance through aggression. It is dominance through structure. When you determine the structure, you determine the value. For example, if someone messages you repeatedly and you answer instantly every time, you establish a pattern of immediate access. That access becomes expectation. Expectation becomes entitlement. The moment you delay, they feel disruption. But if your responses are measured and consistent, not rushed, not emotionally reactive, the pattern forms differently. Access to you feels conditional. That conditionality increases perceived worth. The same applies in professional environments. Leaders who are constantly available lose strategic distance. Leaders who create defined windows of access maintain authority. Scarcity stabilizes hierarchy. Another component of flow control is emotional pacing. Some individuals attempt to accelerate intimacy, conflict, or decision-making. They rush you into commitment, reaction, or disclosure. Acceleration is a tactic. When you allow others to dictate speed, you surrender control. When you slow interactions deliberately, pause before replying, refuse rushed decisions, decline immediate escalation, you reclaim leverage. Pacing is power. Those who rush are often invested. Those who remain steady are evaluated as stable. Stability attracts trust and reinforces hierarchy. Flow control also protects cognitive clarity. Constant engagement fragments focus. Fragmented focus weakens strategic thinking. If your attention is scattered across minor disputes and constant notifications, long-term positioning becomes impossible. Guarding attention is not only social strategy, it is operational efficiency. Machiavellian discipline requires boundaries that are visible through behavior, not announced through words. You do not say, "Respect my time." You demonstrate it by how you allocate it. Over time, people calibrate themselves around your pattern. They wait more carefully. They speak more precisely. They challenge less impulsively. Why? Because they recognize that your attention is not automatic. When you control flow, you also control escalation. If tension rises, you decide whether it expands or dissolves. If praise appears, you decide whether to amplify it or downplay it. You regulate emotional temperature. Temperature control equals situational authority. Many individuals believe power comes from commanding others. In reality, it often comes from regulating the environment. The person who determines rhythm determines outcome. This is why self-control and attention control are inseparable. If you cannot resist reacting, you cannot regulate flow. If you cannot regulate flow, you cannot regulate value. And if you cannot regulate value, you cannot maintain hierarchy. This chapter's directive is clear. If others control, when you engage, they control the exchange. If you control the flow, you control the value. Attention is currency. Flow is the central bank. At the highest level, this is not about silence. It is not about ignoring people. It is not about appearing cold. It is about rarity. Rarity transforms ordinary things into assets. Gold is valuable because it is scarce. Elite access is desirable because it is limited. Influence is respected when it is not constantly available. Your attention functions the same way. When it is predictable and constant, it blends into the background. When it is selective and measured, it acquires weight. The final shift happens when people stop expecting your engagement. They begin preparing for it. Notice how differently people behave around individuals whose attention is scarce. Conversations are tighter. Words are chosen more carefully. Provocation decreases. Posturing softens. Why? Because access feels conditional. With conditional access changes behavior before authority ever needs to be asserted. This is the end state of attention discipline influence without force. You are no longer reacting to every stimulus. You are no longer correcting every misunderstanding. You are no longer defending every minor challenge. You observe more than you speak. You evaluate more than you respond. You choose more than you react, and people notice. There is a psychological mechanism at play here. Uncertainty amplifies perceived value. When people are unsure whether they will receive your attention, they assign more importance to the possibility. Certainty lowers stakes. Uncertainty raises them. However, rarity must be paired with substance. Silence without competence reads as absence. Silence with consistency reads as control. This is why internal stability is essential. If your reduced engagement is driven by insecurity or avoidance, it will leak through micro behaviors. Defensive tone, passive aggression, inconsistency. True scarcity feels calm. You do not withdraw dramatically. You simply become deliberate. You stop giving emotional reactions to trivial stimuli. You stop chasing validation. You stop participating in exchanges that offer no strategic return. Over time, something subtle happens. People start competing for your attention. They initiate more thoughtfully. They escalate less recklessly. They attempt to maintain alignment. The dynamic has inverted. Where once you may have felt pressure to respond, now others feel pressure to maintain relevance. That inversion is power. But it is not achieved through manipulation. It is achieved through discipline. You decide what deserves your focus. You allocate it based on long-term positioning, not momentary emotion. You no longer treat attention as a reflex. You treat it as capital. This final principle is the culmination of the entire framework. The one who guards their attention guards their power. The one who gives it freely subsidizes someone else's. When your attention becomes rare, your presence becomes consequential. When your presence becomes consequential, your words require fewer repetitions. When your words require fewer repetitions, your authority stabilizes. No theatrics, no dominance displays, no constant assertion. just calibrated engagement. Attention is currency, and you are the one who decides its value.